Hey, welcome to this week's Training Focus. Today we're going to talk about Algor mortis. Now, you know rigor mortis and livor mortis. We're going to talk about Algor mortis, which is the heat loss of the body. Algor is Latin, meaning coldness, and mortis, of course, of death. So Algor mortis is a coldness of death, and it has to do with the body cooling after someone has died. Now, for years, there has been this 1.5 degree Fahrenheit per hour loss theory. And it's not just a theory. There is some science behind it, but there is a lot of things that can affect that. So let's dwell into that just for a few minutes here. So, of course, after someone dies, the body will either lose temperature or gain temperature depending on the environment. So we talk about the body cooling, but of course, if the body is in an environment that is warmer than its time of death, let's say it was 98.6 degrees when it died, but it's in an environment of 150 degrees, the body temperature will increase, not decrease. So we're going to approach this as though the body died at 98.6 degrees or somewhere thereabout, and it is in an environment, let's say, at 70 degrees. So that just gives us something that we know the body is going to be cooling because it's in cooler temperatures. So after death, it does lose and gain progressively until it reaches ambient temperature. Now, again, 1.5 degrees per hour is kind of the standard, but let's talk about some things that affect that. It's not straightforward. There's a lot of factors that can affect that formula. For instance, clothing, the type of clothing the person has on or the lack of clothing that they have on. The body mass. You can think of someone maybe that is frail, lack of muscle tone, something like that. They can lose temperature a lot faster. Someone that is very heavily muscled, also fat, they will lose body heat slower. Prescription meds. There's a lot of prescription meds and even illnesses that after you die can cause body temperature to go up. So if your body temperature goes up by, let's say, 2 degrees, obviously at that point, then it's going to take a while for you to come back down to your temperature at death to reach ambient. So the point is, when you try to take the 1.5 degrees per hour and try to use it to determine a time of death, that's where you run into the problem. If it's a perfect temperature with perfect clothing, then you could probably get some good indications of a time of death, but certainly it's not something we use as something for sure to say the time someone died. You know, we can't do like Ducky does on NCIS and stick a liver probe in someone and then say, yeah, it looks to this like they died at 2:12 this morning. Of course, that's not possible. One thing that taking a body temperature or liver temperature is good for is trying to decide if a case could be a hypothermia case or a hyperthermia case. So hypo, of course, the body has died from exposure to cold temperatures. Hyperthermia cases are where a body has died due to extreme heat. And so if you've got a body that, let's say, it's 95 degrees outside, and you've got a body that has got an internal temperature of maybe, let's say, 105, 106, you could have a horrible infection, or it could be a hyperthermia case. And I've had a few of those cases where the internal body temperature has helped me determine that. So there's 2 ways to document a temperature, an internal temperature of the body. So let's first talk about whether or not the body is warm to the touch or not. And so if you're looking at a form that asks you, is the body warm to the touch? Or someone asks you, are they warm to the touch? Just touching their skin, touching their forehead, their stomach, something exposed skin, their arm, is not a good indication of that. Putting your hand in their armpit or in their groin for a few seconds will tell you if there is some core temperature. If you're going to do a liver temp, of course, you need to have the proper temperature gauge for that, and you need to know how to stick and where to stick. And then there's, of course, anal temperature. Anal temperatures are a lot easier on infants and children. It is very hard on adults, especially if adult is starting to go into rigor. It makes it even harder. So what affects body temperature? So one of the reasons why it's not an exact science of trying to determine this 1.5 degrees per hour is that there are a lot of things that can affect how the body loses its heat. So at this point, we're talking about heat loss. And so there's three main mechanisms for that: radiation, conduction, and convection. So radiation is simply the body has died, it is lying there, and heat is just coming off of it. It's just losing heat. Infrared heat loss. It's just radiating the heat into the atmosphere because the atmosphere around it is cooler than it is, and so the heat loss is just evaporating from it. The second way is conduction. And here is when the body temperature conducts to another object or another surface. So if a body has died, let's say on concrete, the concrete acts as a conductive agent. And so heat loss is faster in a body that's lying, let's say, on concrete or maybe on dirt, where it will pull the heat out of the body. And then the last way is convection, heat loss due to moving air. So if the body is lying on something and radiating its heat, if there is air moving around it, it can speed up that heat loss. So back to conduction, I talked about concrete, and concrete is something that pulls heat out of the body really fast. But let's say the body is lying on a bed, on a mattress. That mattress isn't going to pull that heat out of that body nearly as fast. So when you're looking at how the body is cooling, you have to put a lot of factors, of course, in this based on, again, their body makeup, their size, their clothing, the ambient temperature around them, and the surface that they're lying on. All of these things go into affecting the body cooling. So the focus today is to understand that the body cools after death if the ambient temperature is cooler than the body. And it does cool at a fairly consistent rate. However, there are many factors that can affect that. So don't do an internal temperature. Start out with what you believe to be 98.6 degrees as a normal body temperature, because that varies as well. And then do the math to determine 1.5 degree Fahrenheit loss and say, well, this person's been dead for 5.5 hours. Certainly not if you're not taking everything else into consideration. So what are they lying on? How long have they been on that surface? What is their body makeup? Was there a disease process ahead of time? What type of medication are they on? All of that needs to be considered. So understand that Algor Mortis is the body cooling after death, but there are many, many factors that can affect that rate. Hey, if you're not already subscribed to the Death Investigator magazine, go to deathinvestigatormagazine.com and get your free subscription. Lots of articles in there. There's lots of resources in there. And one portion of that is an Ask a Mentor page. And on there are questions and then answers to those questions from readers just like you. So you can take advantage of some specific training there, plus all kinds of resources and articles. And every single month, you'll get a free issue. So go to deathinvestigatormagazine.com and subscribe to your free monthly subscription today.